properties are in there that are not marked. Because Brad Reeves will tell you, and I'll swear to it, that anytime when you dig a grave there, you're going to wind up coming up with either one bone or several bones, because it has been replanted several times, and God has done a wonderful job of just providing more ground to put you in. But now with these coffins, it's really creating a problem. These concrete coffins will not allow us to do that anymore, Brad. I think the church building is one thing, but the people, it's almost, when I go through my family on the four sides, amazing how many of them attended that church. And it's almost, and I bet you, many of you sitting here feel the same way about Chaptico and the church that you attend. It's almost something that it is part of the family, as far as being involved and making sure that you're there to support it. As far as the history of the church is concerned, that's a broad sketch of it. But I want to tell you, read these stories, and I love this one. The will of 1755 of Gilbert Ireland, the Lord High Sheriff. And by the way, Philip Key also served as Lord High Sheriff in St. Mary's County. Requested, and this is the quote, to be buried in Chaptico churchyard burying grounds in a standing position, 3 feet. He is to be buried 3 feet, standing upright, at his dear friend Thomas Dickerson. Now that is what you call soul brothers. We're not going to be separated after death. And they even tell you where this is. This is believed to be opposite the north window of the front of the church. Now the front of the church is not where the altar area is. That's where you come through the door. Today, as far as we know, it's not marked. And then Captain Ellis roams. He roams from the south side of the church, but he was a buccaneer, said to be buried standing up on the left side of the cemetery between the gate and the church near the village middle window in the south side of the church. Two things. You can't come through the gate and him be buried on the right side, and you can't be on the south side. So where he is, we've yet to determine, but maybe with ground penetrating radar, he can be located. The stories spring eternal as far as that cemetery is concerned. Like Brad was just speaking with the Hayden, the young man, local man killed in the Civil War. Interestingly enough, my great-great-grandfather, also from St. Mary's County, he and his 3 brothers served. Now they attended, at that time, Oakley Church. If you will think about it, Dr. Boyd is probably living close to where Philip Key had property down there at the landing, Bushwood Lodge?
I think, yeah, Bushwood Lodge is what you're talking
Bushwood Lodge? So you wind up with Bushwood Lodge down there, and that's where one of the first chapels were built, because the gentleman who was governing St. Mary's County at that time did a church of convenience for his wife, who was Anglican. So that's how the first church got down there. Then they built a second church, and then we wound up putting up the one that we have now. How many of y'all have been through the church down in Chaptico? Most of you live here, but how many have you actually wandered around, crawled through the attic, go up in the bell tower? It's a treasure. I used to lead a colony of young kids every Sunday. We're coming out of church. Mr. Herbie, can we go up in the bell tower again? We'd climb the bell tower, go all the way up to the top. It's only about 60 feet off the ground. But the fact is that they just love crawling through this, and then we walk out on this, where you come out to the roof lineage at the bell tower, you can go through the door and walk along the top ceiling of the barrel of the church. And it's just absolutely, we can remember a few years ago, Brad, when the air conditioner, we would put insulation in that church ceiling. Good gosh, what a mess. Dusty. But again, I'm going to tell you, it's, I think each of us can relate to this. It's just very proud to be able to stand here and speak to you all about the history of this little village, because it's a treasure, no question. Bill, I'm turning back to you.
Thank you, Harvey. All right, I'm going to deviate a little bit because I can, and I'm going to let Virginia Tennyson.
Bill,
I'm sorry, go ahead, Tim.
I just want to mention a couple of things that add on to Kirby's history is that kind of a testament to this wonderful village is that Christ Church is open 24 hours a day. It's never locked. The church is never locked. So you can, what? Don't tell me.
But you gotta push the door, don't pull it.
We can come and visit anytime you want. It's just a wonky colonial board with twists.
Yes, sir.
There,
Harvey?
if you had to guess, how many people do we think are buried in the cemetery? I mean, I'd love to guess.
That wasn't nice, a tree call like that. This was honestly, you know, I told them the other night, the rector over there, we did a little walk through the parish in the cemetery the other night after dark. And I had read there's over 600 to 800 people is allegedly buried there. Now, I'm telling you, where they are, we have yet to find them, but I don't doubt that. Look, after being there for, what did I tell you? 1738?
Wrong time.
Thanks, sir.
Part of that is, the reason for that is when the British came in the War of 1812, the British soldiers wrested a lot of the tombstones out of the ground and dashed them to bits up against the wall. So the knowledge, they've also burned all the church records. They dragged them out to have a big bonfire. And that, they lost all record of where anybody was buried. And that's why so many years after, they're still digging into the grave.
Thanks to our brethren, right? Yeah, I like the, tearing up all the marble floor. I mean, 2 foot square white marble floor in there. They just tore it all up.
Thank you, Harvey. All right, real quick, we're going to do the 50-50, and then Monkey's going to, Virginia, excuse me. $102 to the winner, or half of that? Okay. Okay. Thank you, everyone. $102 to the winner. Last three numbers, 753. There it is, right there. There it is. Got two winners? 753. That's it, 753. There it is. All right, thank you, everyone. All right, Monkey. What are you going to say short?
Can you hear me?
But I'm a Tennyson.
Okay. I am Virginia Tennyson. I am from the Wood family. So they've asked me to speak. I have spent 61 years married to Jackie Tennyson.
God bless you.
And be nice, my children are in the thing.
We know all about it.
Okay. Okay. Jack and I were married on November the 9th, 1958. By January, we had moved into a small white farmhouse just up the road on Dan and Irva Davis's farm, where we worked as sharecroppers for many years as we began our family. My brother Johnny Wood, Jr., managed Zach Fowler's and Son store from 1957 to 1965. I worked there part-time from 1959 to 1960, before going home to start a family with six children. Little did I know that little glimpse into the world of business would be a window into my future. My father, John F. Wood Sr., built Chaptico Grocery in 1965, and after learning the ropes at Zach Fowler and Sons store, my brother Johnny and my father opened the store as co-owners. My husband Jackie came aboard as manager, and Johnny's wife Barbara Ann, and myself began working full-time once the store was officially open. The store operated this way for about 2 years, at which time my brother made the decision to move to Mechanicsville, where he ran and eventually bought Woods Food Right. Around 1975, we had officially outgrown our little farmhouse and moved our family 1 mile south of 234 into a brick rambler where I still reside as of 61 years. Thankfully, our new home was only 1 mile away from the store, because just a few short years later, Jackie and I would take the store over altogether. When Johnny left the store, my dad decided to stay on for a few more years to help Jackie and I learn how to make the store on our own. He stayed until 1979. Jackie and I bought the business from my father that year, and then would eventually buy the building, and it would become ours in 1995. Around 1984, Chaptico's local doctor, Dr. Gough, approached us about an idea to help with the town Christmas tree lighting. Jack and I were delighted with the idea. That first year, we had cookies, hot chocolate, coffee, and cider. And the lighting took place just across the street. They call it the Commons, on 238. The sheriff department had to come, and he closed down 238 for safety reasons for those first few years until we moved the tree lighting to our side of the street. Once we moved the celebration, a tree was planted at the back of the store, and that tree stood as our Christmas tree for many years until it grew too tall. At that point, the Optimist Club swooped in and saved the day. They began donating trees each year. The Optimist Club has been a very important part of the annual Christmas tree lighting since then, and their help has been invaluable. Little did we know how much a part of our community that the annual lighting would become. Folks came from all over St. Mary's County to attend, one of the only down-home Christmas tree lighting still around. We still serve cookies, hot chocolate, coffee, and cider. We also sing Christmas carols all together, and Santa arrives each year by a different mode of transportation. He then points his magical finger and lights our beautiful tree before setting into the chair and hearing all the Christmas wishes of all the children. It is truly one of the most magical part of our Christmas for me and for many of those in our community that have attended the lighting each year since it began over 35 years ago. It is a wonderful way to start your Christmas holidays. When the store first opened, Chaptico was largely a farming and fishing community. Our customers were mainly farmers and fishermen, and the occasional customer who just came passing through. When the racetrack opened at Budge Creek, it really helped our little store grow. The track would host weekend races and bring in large crowds. It became clear that we would have to extend our hours in order to better serve our community. The store hours at that time were 5 in the morning till 8 p.m. in the fall, and 5 and 9 in the spring and summer. The store became a major hub for folks living in our neck of the woods. We carried all the essentials: bait, ice, fishing supply, Vienna sausage, head cheese, sardines, and crackers, and much more, but that was the essential for the fishermen back in those days. The deli is the pride and joy of us. Around 1984, I started the deli with a special employee, and she's here today, and her name is Sandy Lake. It was the two of us. We served soup and sandwiches and offered a full meat counter with deli meats at the time, with nothing but 2 hot electric cookers, a warmer, and a 4-burner electric stove Sandy and I started to offer hot lunches. Our first special was fried chicken. It was served with a choice of a potato and a vegetable. That's as simple as you can get. And so started the long, wonderful journey to the deli you see today. Today we serve barbecue ribs, roast beef, steak, meatloaf, pork chops, chicken pot pie, spaghetti, lasagna, coleslaw, potato salad, egg salad, and chicken salad. We also have cakes and pies. And of course, we still serve fried chicken, made using the same recipe we had used from the beginning. Almost everything we serve is homemade. While our fried chicken remains our calling card, we have a few other community favorites. One of our specialty is stuffed ham, made from my grandmother Mattingly's recipe, so it's over 130 years old. We sell about 800 stuffed hams through the holidays. Another favorite of the customer is our homemade sausage, still made using my grandfather's recipe. We sell over 1,100 pounds of sausage just during the holiday season. We have heard stories of folks flying to Florida, Canada with coolers and stuffed ham, with stuffed ham on their laps, because no other stuffed ham will do for their Christmas, for their families. Early on, Jackie and I not only wanted to serve our community, but to also make our food affordable for the working man. Back then, people did not have a lot of money. Those guys had $6 a day to spend on lunch. We were able to accomplish our goals with hard work, long hours, and a commitment and a belief that God would see us through. We weren't without our setbacks, though. There were many occasions when we would find us serving our customers outside the store while our sons and employees mopped and cleaned up inside the store from snowstorms, hurricanes, earthquakes, and rainstorms. We have been held up at gunpoint and broken into 15 times through the years. I think I am most proud of our children, though. Throughout the years, when the holidays would come around, our sons would come home from their jobs and families to help their mom and dad. Easter, Thanksgiving, and Christmas especially. Along would come our boys, boning out the hams, cooking, stuffing, and slicing. They were always behind the scene. Our grandsons got older. They would be brought in along too, continuing the family tradition. For more than 49 years, Jackie and I served our community through our store. But we looked at one another one day and just decided it was time to pass the torch. For 7 years, on September the 1st, 2012, our son Ronnie and Gwen took over the store. For 7 years, they have worked so hard giving the store a facelift, and now they are grooming and have groomed their daughter Jody and her husband Lucas to take over. The torch was passed to them on April the 1st, 2019 of this year, officially allowing me to see 4 generations of my family serving our community through Chaptico Market. Jackie and I celebrated 50 years in business in March 2015. Standing there next to my son and daughter-in-law, granddaughter and grandson-in-law, as we shared in the pride that this little business has brought to our family, was one of my proudest moments. The backbone of every business owner is the support of the community and their family. The backbone of every family is the parents. John Wood Sr. and Genevieve Wood and Raymond and Thelma Tennyson were mine and Jackie's parents, and they were our role models. They taught us about hard work, faith, which were the main things we needed to get through our years at the helm. In 1887, Chaptico had 6 general merchandise stores. Albert S. Beale, Aquila Burrs, Mrs. E.C. Cootie, Fowler Brothers, James Hayden, and Eva M. Love, and Audrey S. Gardner. Now in 2019, there are only 2 businesses, Chaptico Market and Deli, and there is a liquor store. So let us now see what the future has in store for the little but proud Chaptico. Thank you.
Okay. Jody? Ginger wants you to stand up and be recognized since you're running the store now. So here's the new proprietor of Chaptico Market. And I'd like to say from the whole community, Monkey, we truly are all family. And what you and Jackie did and your parents before you is amazing. And Chaptico wouldn't be Chaptico without Chaptico Market. Every morning you've got the coffee crew in there with the mayor and Alan Hill and my brother Mussy and 3 or 4 others. So they talk too long for me, so I can't go as often as they do. But anyway, I'm going to turn it over now to Uncle Edelen Gough to finish up his presentation. Have you enjoyed this today? Yeah, I just noticed there's a rascal in the back of the hall. Johnny Wood, stand up. Come on, Johnny Wood, stand up. There's Uncle Johnny. Hi, Johnny. I know you must have something to say. He's going to be last? All right, we'll let him sit up front till Edelen finishes. Have a seat up here until the mayor finishes.
Okay, Mr. Wood. I'd like to add also to that monkey in the store. Chaptico's always been a special place. And I thank you all for keeping it a special place. It wouldn't be the same without you, that's for sure. David, I have a little sequel to that story about Mr. Fowler dumping that steer down in the gullet.
Here we go.
It hit the man's still. And Mr. Fowler apologized to him for doing that. He said, no, Mr. Fowler, that's the best moonshine I ever made. Now, at this point, I'm supposed to tell you about how late at Wayside. I wrote it all down and left it home, so I have to go with memory, which isn't very good. Of course, we don't have your history, certainly not the longevity that you at Christ Church have. We've been a part of the community since.
Is this it,
No, since 1914. Up until that time, we didn't have any church for Catholics in Chaptico. They mostly either went to Sacred Heart or St. Joseph. But I'm talking about when most of the transportation then was horse and buggy. And it was quite an effort to do that. Occasionally priests would come to Chaptico and they would say mass at one of the houses. Very often Mrs. Welch. I'm going to go digress back again. When we talk about the Welches, Mr. and Mrs. Welch had the funeral parlor, and as we mentioned before, the son was a doctor, a very good doctor. But the The story around town at the time was the father buried the doctor's mistakes. In 1914, we had the Jesuit priests there, and they decided that they needed a rectory for all of the priests to meet. And Jesuits lived in communities back in those days. And so it would serve the parishes of Holy Angels, Sacred Heart, St. Joseph, and Mechanicsville. And they would go out to the parishes during the day and come back there at night, and they had a lady that cooked for them and all. She was named Fanny Busker, and I tell you, she was a good cook, because I ate a lot of meals there myself. Yeah. So we built, can you give me that right behind you? Yeah. Okay, they got together and they built a rectory, and Mr. John Dean was the builder, and he had built several, particularly Catholic buildings in the county. I think the hall at Holy Angels, one at Sacred Heart, St. Mary's Academy, he built that building. Built so many that one day the nun in catechism class asked the little boy, said, "Who made the world?" The boy said, "I know the answer, was Johnny Dean." So anyway, this is the rectory. The chapel that we had, I say we had a church, and that was a chapel. It was just this little section in here. All the rest of it was a place for the Jesuits to stay. It, I understand, seated 80 people when it was built. And soon that grew. I remember going there when I was real young, maybe 7, 8 years old. And the chapel was filled with people standing. As you walked into the building, there was a big, large hall, and the chapel was to the left. That was full of people. And there was a stairway going up to the next floor, and that was full of people. Summertime, they were all sitting out in the porch and all, but of course you couldn't do that in the wintertime. So it certainly became known that we needed the church to accommodate all the people. As a matter of fact, I understand that up at the top of the steps, 2 young men had gotten in a card game doing mass. And I understand that moved the new church up a couple of years sooner than it would have been. So they got together, and Father Greenwell was our pastor at the time, and I'll be talking about him a good bit. I don't know how many of you are familiar with, most of you probably are, with Greenwell State Park. Well, Father Greenwell's brother, Phil Greenwell, owned that property, and he's the one that left it to the state and to be able to make it into what it is now. Matter of fact, if you go over there's a very small chapel, and I think that was built so that when Father Greenwell went over, he had a place to say mass. So anyway, Father Greenwell had raised funds through wealthy people that he'd known, and we still needed to raise $5,000, which back then was a lot of money. But anyway, they got a committee together. I remember my father was one of them. And they got donations, $10, $5, $1. Anyway, they met the goal. and the church was built. The architect was Mr. Phil Froman, who was one of the architects on the National Cathedral in Washington. It was said that he was the architect. Well, he was one of them. I'm sure he wasn't the only one. And the builder was Elder and Wills. Mr. Elder was the overseer and the foreman. And I remember them working there, and they'd come down to my uncle's store and lunchtime, get something to eat, and eat out on the porch there. Several years after that, I got to know Mr. Elder's son, Al, to the Rotary Club up in La Plata. And he liked to tell me the tale about he and Father Green were going to Baltimore to get the pews for the church. Well, Al was only about 13 or 14, he couldn't drive. Father Green was going, he bought a truck from Rewatchka Mill. Father Green was drive, but he didn't know how to shift the gears. Al knew how to shift the gears. So they went to Baltimore with Father driving and Al shifting. And they got up there, and he said, I tell you, when we got in Baltimore, we went through quite a few red lights if there wasn't a car coming. We didn't want to have to stop and change gears again. Anyway, they went up there and got the pew and got back with that instant. The digging to start the building, what do you call it?
Foundation.
Groundbreaking, that's what the word was. That occurred on September 15th, 1937. And the church was dedicated May 24th, 1938, which was the feast day of Our Lady of the Wayside. Bishop McNamara was there, one of the principal speakers, and then there was I can't recall his name, but it was a senator from Massachusetts that one of the speakers. So it was a big day in the parish, and they had a dinner all afterwards. The saddest thing was that wasn't about 3 or 4 years later that Father Graham passed away. He died at the year, only 50 years old, cancer. So we went on, and the church, most of you are familiar with it, this is the church now, and it looks just like it did when it was built. I've always said its beauty is in its simplicity, and it is just a plain, simple building, but that simplicity adds to the, Father Graham said, adds to the beauty of it very much. In the 1960s, probably mid-60s, the Jesuits decided that they were going to give up the parishes. They had all the parishes down there because they were needed in other places. So when that happened, the diocesan priests came down, and they all started building rectories in their own particular churches. So that left our big rectory up there with one priest left in it. They said that wasn't enough to support that building. So the building was leased out to a group. They called it Loretto House to start with, and it ended up being Alternatives for Youth. It was a home for boys that had been in some kind of trouble, didn't have any families, or maybe even had some psychological problems. And I think they did a lot of good. My wife worked there as business administrator. But one night, one of the boys lit a candle in in the closet where he was trying to read a book that he wasn't supposed to be reading, and set the place on fire. And before fire department could get there, it was too far gone to save. So that was the end of the building. We had a hall that we got in about in the late 40s. I was away at school at the time. But it was a barracks or mess hall, one of the other, up Fort Meade, I understand. And they found out that it was available for charitable organizations. So they went up and got a group together and went up and dismantled it and brought it home and set it up. Had a beautiful floor in it. They put a new floor in it. And we had our church dinners and different functions there and dances. Lots of nice dances. We'd have a dance between Christmas and New Year, and at the end of it, we'd serve breakfast. And I tell you, that was sold out before the day the dance ever got there. Anyway, that had served its purpose. It lasted about 20 years, something like that. And with the proceeds from the insurance from the Loretto house, and we had a drive to raise some more money, we were able to accumulate enough funds to build the hall that we have there now, which is Loretto Hall. And it's a beautiful little hall. Just this past year, or last year, I guess it was, one of our parishioners donated all the money to have the inside completely redone. New floors, paneling and all around the walls, new ceiling, new lights, chandeliers, new tables and chairs, and that one preacher donated all that, so it's a beautiful little hall now. I believe I've pretty well covered what I wanted to say. I left my notes behind. But,
Talk about the food pantry.
huh?
I want you to talk about the food pantry.
Well, there is a food pantry there. I said my wife worked there. She was very active in the church. And she was the one that really started and got a food pantry organized there. And it was successful enough that they needed more room to store the stuff. And in 2010, they decided to build a new room just to accommodate the food pantry. And they named it the Mary Lou Gore Food Pantry. My wife was dying of cancer at the time, and the father came up to tell her that what they were doing. A lot of you here knew Mary Lou, and she was never lost for words, that's for sure. But the day he came up to tell her about that, the only thing she could do was cry. She was so pleased with the idea of that happening. So that was the story on that. So anyway, we're proud of our little church. And like I said, this is a story with a happy ending. It's probably attendance is as good as I remember. I've been there since it was built. I was an older boy when it was dedicated. And organizations and activities of as vibrant as I ever remember them being. So in this secular world we live in today where there's so many people that don't profess any faith, don't affiliate with any faith, I think that's quite an accomplishment. So all I can say in the end is, let's hope that Our Lady of Wayside and Christ Church will continue continue to be the two sentinels in Chaptico that continue to guide and guard out people in the village. That's all I have to say.
First off, I just want to say to Jenny and everybody who's involved, this is something great. Something great that a lot of people, and would like to see a whole lot more, got here and know and hear what went on in Chaptico over the years. And because there was a lot of good stuff and a lot of good people down here. I don't write nothing down. I speak as it comes out. Sometimes it's good and sometimes it's bad. My wife doesn't agree with me all the time, but those things happen. I just want to say, you know, 1950, which has nothing to do with Chaptico at the time, but 1950, my mother and father opened a store in Mechanicsville. And you probably, some of you all know that hasn't been there for a couple of years, where the Mexican restaurant is now. And we were there for 42 years in that store. My father and mother, it was their store. I was going to school with all my brothers and sisters. And my good sister over here, everybody knows her. I know her as Monkey. I don't know whether you all know that. No. That's the only thing I know of. So, after I graduated from Charlotte Hall and came to work in the store, and I'm sure I wasn't the only one in this world. My father and myself didn't see eye to eye all the time. I was a young generation, he was an older, and everything, so, and we had our differences. If it wasn't for my mother, who was, good, and she kept us apart very much. And so, from that, I was really unhappy. But I think, I can't remember whether it was a bread man or a soft drink, Coca-Cola guy, was telling me that one day in there that Zach Fowler wanted to sell his store down here. So I came down, looked at it. And this is in 1967. At that time. You remember, I'm 21 years old. And we looked at it, and I don't care how bad it was good. I was going to get away from my father for a while, and all. So I borrowed the money, came to Chaptico in the store. And there's some of you remember the old store, and some of you don't. But it was a store like, if you ever watch TV, and you watch movies like Gunsmoke or those things, and you see the grocery stores in those little old towns, I mean, it wasn't half as big as this room. And we carried stuff. Not only did we have groceries, and everything was over the counter. Wasn't no self-service, everything was over the counter. You came in, same way with, we didn't have a cash register like we got today. All you had was a brown paper bag and a pencil. That's what you used. And that's how we operated. But in that store, groceries, a little bit of meat, some vegetables. We carried work clothes, work shoes, beer, gasoline, anything that you would need, we carried there. And that was the way it was. And in the back room, that was converted into a table and a card table. Had to have them, okay? That was part of it. And that was the way as far as the store was concerned. But the most memorable thing that I ever said, the old store had a porch all the way across on one end of it was the post office. And then on the other end was the store. And on the other end, we had a gas tank out there. But it was a porch. And in this old store, you used to sit, when you came out of the store on the porch, you look right at the back of Christ Church. Between the store and Christ Church was the graveyard. But during the summer months, every night, 7, 8 o'clock, when the guys that were farmers or whatever, when they finished eating dinner, they came to the store. We sat out there on that porch, 10, 11 o'clock at night. And I know you ladies are gonna like this. They always talk about women like to gossip. Well, I can tell you, they can't hold a light for men. I can tell you that. And it was every night. You know, it didn't make any difference. They come down, they sit out there and during the day. I mean, during the winter, we didn't have central heat. We had a kerosene stove over in the corner. And they stood around the kerosene stove and did the same thing. Or they'd go in the back room and sit around the table. And that was what went on during those days. And that was 65 when I came down here. Excuse me. And might go back to my father again. Him and my mother were there. And back in them days, it was a little bit different. Daddy was I guess you say a part-time mail carrier. 1 day a week. Unless the regular mail carrier got sick or on vacation or whatever. And he was going to retire. So Daddy said, well, he'd been this mail carrier, temporary mail carrier for several years, and he wanted to apply for it. So I guess he talked to my mother. He came to me and said, look, and at that time too, as Monkey said, she was working part-time in the store. Lorraine was working part-time in the store. And we had another fella, Alfred Davis. Alfred Davis was working part-time. And so he came to me and he says, talked to me about it, you know. Said he had this chance to get the mail carrier job. And he'd like to do it. And he said, but in order to do it, I'd like for you to come back to Mechanicsville and run the store up there. You and your mother run that store, and we'll get Monkey and Jackie to come and run the store in Chaptico. After I finished the mail route, he would come to Chaptico and do whatever they had for him to do or help them out and all, and that was life for a while. And in the old store, a couple of years later, the fellas decided that the old building and it was an old building too. That, they were gonna do away with the old building. It's right down the end of this road, right there on the turn. Nothing's there now but the house, where the Fowlers live. And, excuse me. So, I went back to Mechanicsville, Monkey Jack, we were gonna run that, Daddy was doing that. And a couple years later, Daddy decided that, right on the corner out there, he would look into it to buy that piece of land. And when he did, he wanted to build a store there, which he did. That's not all of it. It's not, it was been added on to, but he built a store and he moved. Oh, thank you. So, and when they built the store there, and you can see what's happened now. Monkey Jack has done a great job down there, and as far as the store is concerned, and their families. And we did, as far as our family. With Monkey and Jackie talking about their family working in the store. You know, Daddy and Mama in the store in Mechanicsville. We were going to high school and we worked. When you got out of school, you had about half an hour or so. Or else you better have a damn good excuse why you wasn't in the store when you got out. So, and our kids, just like that, they worked. They knew how to work. And I've said this many, many times. Their family, our family, I never worried about them. They could get a job any place because they were taught. They had to work. The old saying is, you know, no work, no eat. And that's the way it was. But that was old Chaptico. And back in those days, it wasn't but two stores. Our store, well, and I guess it was a little on the corner down there, and they didn't care too much as far as groceries concerned. Most of them was a bar room and a garage, and that was it, as far as businesses were concerned. So, I'll ask any questions if anybody has any. But I've been known I could go on and on and on. Yeah.
Did you go to school with Sylvester Stallone?
No, he was behind me. And I will say this. I had a reputation back in my early days. No. That I started out in public school, and from that I went to a parochial school with the nuns, 4 years at public school, 4 years with the nuns, and they decided to put me in Charlotte Hall Military School.
You must have had a good reputation.
Well, I was a boy, just put it that way. I was a boy. So, anybody else got any questions?
We can catch you afterwards too.
Okay. Thank you.
Johnny. Is Shelby still here? Shelby, you want to come up and say a few words, please? Shelby Guazzo, Dr. Guazzo.
I think I can reach you all. My story is kind of the reverse. In just a few minutes, my husband and I came here to make our roots. And if you look at your Chaptico map, as we did, we were looking around a place in St. Mary's County. Dr. Quade brought us down here, and we said, well, we're looking at the eastern Eastern Shore. And he said, no, you won't come down here. I know you'll like it, and you won't have to fool with that Bay Bridge. And to top it off, he said, I'll pay for your plane to come down here. You can stay at my house. And when his brother, what was his brother's name? The lawyer, Oliver, apparently Dr. Wilder was tight as a tick. And when he offered to do that, Oliver was just floored. But we did just that. We said, okay, well, we hadn't made up our minds. We'll come and look. And we knew we wanted to be in the northern end of the county because we still had family up in the New Jersey area. New Jersey people are kind of footloose. They wander around a lot. But you see over there are 8 roads that come to Chaptico. And my husband's one driving desire was to buy some land on a river that led to the sea. And we did. And then we looked around Chaptico, we liked that little hillside up there. And the man that owned it was Obadiah, isn't that a great name? Obadiah Nelson. And so my husband went to see him one day, and he was the one that used to do all the yard work down at Christ Church, I'm told too. Somebody know that, didn't he, Brad?
Yes, with a little 21-inch push mower.
Yeah. So my husband explained that he would like to open an office there. My husband was a family physician. He said he wanted to see anything come through the door. He wanted all the variety that people can present. And Obi had a perfectly good family to leave it to, but he told my husband, he said, I would really like to know that I brought a doctor to Chaptico. And so he agreed to sell it to us, and I thought that was just nifty. So there are people that love it here. You all have been here, you know, in your kith and kin for many, many years. But there are people like us coming in. And that's all I want to say.
Thank you, Shelby. Karen?
Just real quickly, I wanted to applaud Ginger and her committee for getting this together, and your choice of speakers on the history and traditions here of Chaptico. And truly, I think to summarize this day in one sentence is, we are those who have come before us. And that's truly what this day represented, and I hope it can happen again.
Thank you. Now, we have someone else who wants to speak. Mr. White, Fred White?
What a very special gathering. Celebrating the American pursuit of life, liberty, and happiness. Celebrating America's pursuit of life, liberty, and happiness. And I just have two different sets of remarks. One, I'm a newcomer. I was a really bad boy, till 50 years old, till I was 50 years old. To the extent that the Episcopal Church, well, first of all, my family background was a Reformation church, the Methodist church. My mother and father were devout Christians, and home was Camp Springs, Maryland, when it was still Southern Maryland. It was still tobacco farm country, and raised on a tobacco tenant farm, forged dirt, and we went to the Methodist church in Camp Springs. So I was in one of the Reformation churches, and as I grew up, I turned out to be a really bad boy until I was 50 years old. To the extent that the Port Tobacco Parish in La Plata, the Episcopal Church in La Plata, asked me not to come to church anymore. The vestry invited me to stay away from church, okay? Not be around their children, okay? I left out an important element of the story. 60 years ago, this beautiful young lady back here, a cradle Episcopalian, Patricia Bolden, one of Herbie's family. 60 years ago, I married her. I married the Episcopal Church. So, and our best family friends are Herbie and Lynn Redmond, and what a wonderful church community, Christ Church, Chaptico. I say, and I think most of the congregation agrees with me, our trademark is hospitality. Trademark is hospitality. There are no rules, just right. You come through the door of Christ Church, Chaptico, you're welcome. And we'll do what we can to help you. And I kept telling Pat, I'm not going back to church. The church told me, get away, get out. And she said, you gotta go back to church for the children. You gotta go back to church for the children. And I said reluctantly,